Hey guys, Hachiman here. This is part 1 of the Matilda review. The Matilda is the Tier 4 British medium, often overlooked by a lot of players, which is interesting because it's really a fantastic tank. Now I'm going to drill this down a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. Tier 4, there we go. The Matilda is my only Tier 4 tank. The Matilda, to talk about its history for a moment, and the one we play with in World of Tanks is actually the Matilda Mark II. The Matilda Mark I was a very, very slow infantry support tank with a relatively wimpy gun on it, but it wasn't designed for anti-tank purposes. It was meant to break infantry lines. And now, you would say, well, by default, then it can't handle enemy tanks. Well, it couldn't, but the enemy tanks couldn't handle it either, because it had substantial armor. The Matilda Mark II was also an infantry support tank, but its armor was really absolutely ridiculous for anything at the time. 75 millimeters on the frontal hull, 75 millimeters on the turret all the way around, 70 on the hull sides and 55 in the rear. Now, historically, I do believe this tank had 70 on the rear as well, but I suppose Wargaming feels the need to give the tank a weak spot. The Germans couldn't deal with this tank. The only way they could defeat this tank on the battlefield was by turning their 88 anti-aircraft guns and towed artillery guns and using them as anti-tank batteries. And I believe that started in France with Rommel, actually. Rommel's the one who created that tactic. You can see the armor covers the skirts. It's a beast of a tank, having basically the same armor as a Soviet KV-1, which, as we all know, is an overall very well, heavily armored Tier 5 heavy tank. You've got some gun options on the Matilda. And you see, I don't actually choose to go for the 3-inch howitzer. The reason I don't like the 3-inch howitzer is 38 millimeters of penetration, 175 damage using high explosive ammo. There's a lot of tanks in the game that have that type of weapon. And the simple fact is, I've never found it extraordinarily successful. This 2-pounder has an average damage of 55, which is not fantastic by any means, has a penetration of 121, which is fantastic. You can penetrate KV-1s with this, simply put, and there's nothing in Tier 4 that can take a hit from you. I mean, you might get some RNG and bounce here or there, but generally speaking, any shot you fire at a Tier 4 or lower tank is going to penetrate. But this is what I love about this tank, the rate of fire, and you'll see it in the gameplay. Which will be part 2. You'll see how this gun just chews through enemy tanks in record time. 28.57 rounds per minute. It basically fires a shot every 2 seconds, just over. And you see I've got a tank gun rammer and vents. When I play this tank, I can fire a round every 1.77 seconds, I believe it is, which is absolutely ridiculous. I also have a gun laying drive on it. What the heck, you know? Alright, so if you've got a great gun that will handle anything at Tier 4, and you've got OP armor, what's the weak point on this tank? Well, the weak point is pretty obvious right here. Top speed 24 kph. Everything just about at Tier 4 is faster than you. It's just that simple. Even the Tier 4 heavies like the German DW2 and the French B1, even they're faster than you are. It's absolutely ridiculous. But if you remember why this tank was designed, it was designed as an assault tank against enemy lines. It didn't have to be fast. You would want it to simply march on its way slowly and inexorably towards the enemy while they bounce shots off it. And that's what's funny about that, is that's exactly the way you have to play this tank. In terms of weak spots, the cupola up top is a weak spot, but it's very hard to hit, as you can see. And if you can hit in this rectangle on the turret not in the gun mantlet, that's this round spot right here, but if you can hit the rectangle, especially on the sides, you can penetrate that turret. It's not 75 millimeters there. You're going to have, even though this looks very flat right through here, you're going to have a very hard time penetrating that. Typically speaking, if you hit the side, all you're going to do is put a shot in the tracks. If I'm in my Matilda, track me. I don't care. I'm slow anyway. It really isn't going to matter that much. The only way that'll matter is if artillery is in the game. Artillery is the biggest danger to this tank, simply put. View range is pretty decent, 340 millimeters. Signal range stinks, 450 meters signal range, but it's a tier 4 tank. And let's be blunt, most tanks in that tier don't have great radios. You see I load it with mostly AP ammo, a little bit of APCR just in case I end up in a tier 5 or 6 game and have to crack a big heavy. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. You play this as an armored beast and you charge your way at your opponents and you just lay waste to them, which that's pretty much it. Please watch part 2. Part 2 is gameplay of the Matilda. I will show you one thing really quickly. Looking at this tank, and you can see I've played a lot of tanks, some worse than others. Where is she? Matilda, tier 4. I've played 216 battles with a 60% win rate in this tank. I have killed 8 tanks in this tank before, and I've done 1,563 damage, and I've got an excellent damage ratio and kill death ratio, 1.77 and 1.71, and I survived almost 30% of my battles in this. So it is a great tank. I highly recommend you check it out. Please watch part 2, the gameplay, so you can really see what this tank can do when it is in a battle of its own tier.